this war with the Romulans, millions die. So far, it's still going on.
In the Strange New Worlds episode, A Quality of Mercy, Pike misjudges both his enemy's ability and their culture to a massive degree. The Federation is plunged headfirst into a war that would last at least a century and cause thousands upon thousands upon thousands of deaths. The war would be brutal and it would be long, but the fact is, the Praetor was probably more justified in declaring it than you realize. Let's just get into it.
We can beam you and your crew aboard. You don't have to do this.
It is not our way. I regret that we meet in this way. You and I are of a kind.
To better understand the war itself, we have to analyze Romulan culture. The most simplistic and, well, honestly reductive explanation for the Romulans is that they are from the same ancestors as the Vulcans, but have not given up their emotions. As stated, this is overly simplistic, but for the analysis, it works. As the Romulan Star Empire grew and formed, they would have had historical burdens of war, which included atomic devastation. Those under the Raptor wing would be naturally suspicious of all around them. They had seen what happened when a unified people were allowed to spread ideas that were unchecked, that were dangerous. It devastated the original homeworld that they came from, and for that reason, the need for control would be necessary. The Tal Shiar, a secret police, as well as laws would be created to ensure that any dissidence was immediately identified and, well, handled. Pairing these two measures with education and propaganda that glorify the state would help ensure the safety for all citizens.
You don't remember a time without war, but I do. Who wins an endless war with the Federation? We will, Commander.
Internally, things would be tenuous, as such measures would be considered barbaric and somewhat hostile. Ultimately, elements that believed in freedom of speech and other such nonsense would try to rise up, starting out in the shadows, but moving on from there. For a small time, this could be handled, quietly. However, the problem with ideas is that they're a virus, and people do need to be saved from themselves. These kinds of elements would continue to push for more and more freedoms and cause more and more internal struggle. However, a good stopgap might be to have another enemy to focus on. Hey guys, if you've been watching other channels, you may have noticed them talking about YouTube massively impacting both views and revenue of us all. The same has happened to the Lore Reloaded. If you'd like consistent and continued uploads, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Lore Reloaded or clicking the join button below. Any little bit helps. Now let's get back to it.
We're holding to our side of the neutral zone, as you are. Yet you demand our surrender?
Captain, I have you surrounded. Surrender, or we will destroy you. You have 1 minute to comply.
You know, I don't like her.
In the 23rd century, the Romulan Star Empire would have a couple of options. They could go up against the Klingons, which we know are brutal and are willing to fight, an extremely aggressive species, so instigating a war with them wouldn't be that wise, especially when you consider they would be willing to go as far as needed, if not more, to win. Or you could go with the Federation, which was a far different beast, at least from the perspective of the Praetor. If it was proven that the Federation, and indeed Starfleet, were timid, then a war with them would be exactly what was needed.
Thank you, Captain Pike. If not for your weakness, we would have never known what easy targets your Federation would be. Goodbye.
The Romulan Star Empire could engage with near impunity and keep it going for as long as is necessary. And if it got too much, they would sue for peace. After all, the Federation would be more than willing to stop fighting and give up territory. There would be dissidents against the war, especially those wanting freedoms. But they could be arrested and adjudicated swiftly, with some being given more lenient sentences to show out the mercy of the ironically authoritarian regime. In fact, I would argue the entire reason the attack on the border happened was to see if the Romulan Empire could use the Federation to stop internal strife. And honestly, this is the way the government works. It's the way it has to work to ensure peace and prosperity. The entire history of the Romulan Star Empire was about ensuring that enemies could not defeat and destroy everything you cared about. The only way that this works is if there are limited people who are in control of this new state. Once all of these elements are in place, protecting the state is what one has to do to ensure that everyone stays safe. It's a virtuous circle, if you will. And thus, to protect the state, you must plunge it into war. So in a way, it makes perfect sense to go on a genocidal war with the Federation to ensure that internal elements don't gain any foothold and to stop a nation from becoming even more powerful when you know they'll back off at the first sign of peace. You've created a common enemy that everyone can rally around, and one that will sue for peace as much as possible, meaning that they're useful idiots until you don't need them anymore. At least that's the opinions of the Praetor. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded. Did you enjoy this video? Then you should check out my video on Pike promoting woke culture in the Federation and grooming Spock, or get into real politics on another channel that I run. That's if you want to get triggered.